Cheech here with Fly Fish Food. I got my purple Renzetti Master. We're tying up a storm. We're tying a cool dry fly called the Stubby Chubby. Brig, it's a fly named after you.
Fly Fish Food.
Okay, so this is going to be the Stubby Chubby. Everybody fishes Chubby Chernobyls. This is just a much smaller version of it. And it starts out with a super cool hook that's designed by Umpqua called the Stubby T. So this is a size 14. It's a fairly short shanked hook, so you have to be really careful with proportions on this. So I'll just start by dressing the hook with thread. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is take some Glow Bright floss. There are 4 strands in here, and I'm going to tie that in close to the head and just tie that all back and trim that off about right there. I don't know what percentage of the hook shank that is, but about like that. From here I'm going to take my thread all the way to the front of the fly and grab my dubbing and dub from front to back. Now on a Chubby Chernobyl, I see, lots of people are wrapping foam as an underbody. So they'll wrap foam and then wrap a bunch of dubbing and thread over the top of it. But that just compresses the foam and it pushes all the air out of the foam. It really doesn't help the flotation a ton. So what I'm going to do is I'll just start up here by the head and I'm going to wrap backward. What this does is, if you've ever fished a foam fly that spins on the hook shank, it's usually because it doesn't have a very good anchor. So this dubbing is just kind of the anchor for everything to sit on the fly. Alright, so I've got a little piece of 2mm foam. It's cut roughly the width of the hook gap, and I'm going to take that foam and cut a little notch in the back of it, just like that, just to have a fancy look to it. And I'll tie that so that the points of that notch are roughly in line with that tag or the hot spot, and I'll just tie that in. Now with most chubbies, what I'll do is I'll just advance my thread forward a little tiny bit to create a little flat spot for those legs to be tied in. So once I have that, I'll tie the foam in really nicely. There's no need to super glue that down because the dubbing will keep it nice and in the same spot. For this fly I'm using just some sort of elastic Spanflex type material. The smaller the better. Well, not really. This is size small, but I'm going to purposefully leave the legs long a little bit so that I can mark them later. It's kind of an optional step, but I'll show you how to do it. And these are a little bit curly, so that's fine. The curly legs don't affect the effectiveness of the fly, so we'll just tie them in curly at first. So that's how we're looking. As you can see, I prefer to tie it in on one side, loop it around, and then tie it in on the other side. And then I'll just take enough dubbing to cover up my thread wraps and also to wrap up the body to the next tie-in spot. So I'll do a few loops of dubbing, just enough to cover up the thread, and then I'm going to wrap forward. I have a little bit too much dubbing, so I'll just rip that off, and then I'll go about, I don't know, an eye length back from the eye to do my next tie-in spot. So I'll tie it in right here. And again, I'm going to go back a little bit now to create that little spot to tie in my legs. But I'm also going to tie in a wing and an indicator here. Hey, squatch. Shh. Okay, for the wing, I'm just going to use some EP trigger point fibers in Pale Morning Dun. And on Chubby Chernobyls in general, I'm going to tie it in like this, and then I'm going to take the front wing and grab it and kind of push it forward to create a little bulb, as you can see that right there. So when I create that little bulb, it gives me something to tie off. So there's a little tiny bulb of yarn that's tied off there, and I'm going to get rid of this long piece just because it's annoying. And from here I'm going to tie on my rubber legs. You can tie the legs on before the wing if you want. Actually, I'll do it this way. So my next rubber leg section goes on here. And then the last thing that I tie on is going to be a little indicator, which is also EP trigger point in fluorescent orange. I'll tie that on a little longer than I like it because I'm going to trim it. And then to get this one to lay back, I'm actually going to just take some more dubbing and cover up my thread wraps. So pull all those fibers back, cover up my wraps, and now I'm going to pull everything back, advance my thread to the eye and whip finish. Alright, so the whip finish is done. Now we just need to make some sense out of this mess that we're calling a fly. So I'll trim the head a little bit longer than normal. It's going to be going over the front of the fly. I'm going to take my little wing and I'm going to cut that about half the length of the other wing. You can trim your main wing down a little bit if you want. And then for the legs, I'm going to add a little bit of marking to them. So what I'm going to do is I'll take a Sharpie and I'll just angle those legs down and pull them tight. I'll try to do this so that the camera can see. So I pull those tight, and if I take the marker and I rotate the legs on the marker with them pulled tight, it will mark both sides. And then I release that, and now you have some really nice uniform markings on your legs. Okay, so now we have all those legs coming off. The length of the legs is kind of up to you. What I like to do is I'll take, say, the front 4 legs and push them all forward and trim them all at the same time. And that way they're all the same length. And the back legs, I can just come in here and trim them the same length as the front legs. And there you go. That is the Stubby Chubby. It's a killer little dry fly pattern for all kinds of trouts. Alright, so check out the recipe in the link below at flyfishfood.com. We have all the fly tying materials you could ever want or need.